Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. It is finally time for the first real championship of the year to begin with the first Formula E round in Mexico City, which means it is just about time for me to give you a little preview of the upcoming season. Last year saw the introduction of the Gen 3 chassis, which came along with the very unique and interesting energy-conserving style of peloton racing. We had an intense championship battle with Jake Dennis, first going up against Pascal Wehrlein and then later on more against the Kiwi duo of Mitch Evans and Nick Cassidy. And ultimately we had a very intense championship with lots of chaos, carnage and tears along the way. For the upcoming season, we will maybe potentially finally get the promised pit stops, which would be quite an interesting sight in an all-electric series. But instead of focusing on technical innovation, I want to instead focus on the driver lineups and preview the inter-team battles a little bit, maybe talk about the team performances along the way. And we are going to structure this based on reverse performance of engine manufacturers last year. So without any further ado, let's get going. First up, we have the two Mahindra powered teams, as Mahindra was by far the worst engine manufacturer on the grid last year, and unfortunately for most of it, just not competitive whatsoever. Abt Cupra was therefore the worst team on the grid for most of the season. They have replaced Robin Rines with Lucas di Grassi for the upcoming season, and he will be going up against Nico Müller. More or less, the battle in this team depends on can the car actually do something. If it is anything like this season, where they were only competitive for one or two races, then it doesn't really matter and it's going to be down to luck. If they can actually fight for points, I do think Nico Müller might take this, although he is obviously going up against a massive veteran in di Grassi, but I just think he might be a little bit more hungry. Either way, this one will largely depend on the team performance itself, in my opinion. Similar story, although a little bit more interesting for the factory Mahindra Racing operation, as they also have a fully new lineup for the upcoming season. First off, they've got F1 reject Nick de Vries coming back to Formula E after his not so successful stint over in the AlphaTauri in F1. He will be going up against Eduardo Mortara. Both of them are very experienced in the series and very experienced drivers overall. This should be one of the closer battles on track as well, I think. But I do believe that de Vries will get the redemption arc he quite frankly deserves after this very, very weird and bizarre stint in F1. And although obviously there are a few caveats to his Formula E World Championship title, he is a much better driver than he got to show. So maybe I am voting based on personal biases, but yeah, I think he's going to take it just for that redemption arc. Next up we have the ERT Formula E team, formerly known as NEO. Yeah, I don't really know what's going on with the branding there, but they have decided to keep their proven driver duo of Sergio Sette Câmara and Dan Ticktum. They are a very solid driver combination, although Ticktum, obviously as we might know, does tend to get himself into trouble every now and then. Overall, they are pretty reliable. The car maybe not as much. It's one of those that struggles to consistently score points, unfortunately, but nonetheless the duo was pretty closely matched throughout the year, but in an almost weird way, a bit reminiscent of what we also had with McLaren. It was still Ticktum ahead most of the time, as far as I can recall anyway. So there is no reason for me to think that Sette Câmara is gonna change that dynamic now, and therefore I do see Ticktum winning this particular duel. Next up we have the Nissan powered teams. First of all, McLaren, which they are replacing René Rast, who is going to leave to focus on his sports car career. He is getting replaced by Sam Bird, who is really, like Nick de Vries, in desperate need of a redemption arc because his season has been atrocious. Not that he's been slow throughout, just super crashy and inconsistent and costing the team the team's championship title on the way out. So a lot of things going wrong for Sam Bird. His teammate on the other end, Jake Hughes, had a very good, very solid rookie season, I would say. The car started out a lot better in like the first third, similar to maybe the Porsche powered teams, and then they sort of slowly dropped off. he could not quite match or beat Rust over the season, but like he was very close to him in a similar dynamic, as I said earlier, to Seta Kamara and Tictum. So I do think with Bird looking as washed as he did and Hughes having a very good and promising rookie season, I would feel somewhat confident in saying that he can actually take this and win this particular duel. Obviously, there is a chance of the Bird redemption arc, similar to what I am maybe expecting from De Vries, but the way it was looking, I wouldn't necessarily bet on it, let's put it that way. The Nissan factory team, on the other hand, has decided to keep their former rookie, Sasha Fenestras, for a second year, and he is now going to be partnered with veteran Oliver Rowland, and I do think this should also be a pretty close duel. Fenestras, I mean, he did get beat quite significantly by Nato in the standings, but I don't think the standings necessarily reflect how it has looked on track. Both have had pretty strong races, both were also largely anonymous for large parts of the season as the car or the engine just wasn't quite there. Either way, I wouldn't get fooled by the points gap that you can see from the standings last year. I do think Fenestras had a pretty strong rookie season, so I think he will be able to maybe push Rowland, but I don't expect him to beat him just yet. Maybe that'll come in the future years. Nonetheless, this should be an interesting battle to watch. Maserati had a up and down season last year, lacking a bit of consistency, both with their driver duo, Günther in particular finding himself in the wall a few times, but also the car performance. This year, hopefully, they can take the right steps that they've shown towards the end of last season and can actually be a bit more competitive throughout. To do so, they have also replaced Mortara with F2 graduate Jehan Daruvala. The former Red Bull Junior is maybe not quite F1 material. He has cooled off a little bit during his years in F2, I would say. He's been largely anonymous this year, at the very least, compared to what we would have maybe expected from a guy with this much experience in the series. Nonetheless, he was definitely not a backmarker in any way, shape or form. He was still, at least to an extent, pushing Hauger in terms of pace and everything. He's a quick racing driver, so I am very much looking forward to his step up to like the fully professional game as opposed to the feeder series. He'll be paired with Maxi Günther, which also means that this is one of the younger driver lineups on the grid, a bit like development focused, which, as you may have guessed already, I do like that sort of thing. So this should be a cool one to watch. I don't think that Daruvala really stands a chance in his first year against Maxi Günther, so don't expect the battle to be too close, but nonetheless, I think it's always good to see fresh talent entering a series. Next up, we have DS Penske, and I was honestly a bit surprised to see this team this far up the order in the standings. I didn't remember this because the team did heavily rely on Jean-Eric Vergne to carry them, really. He's had a lot of really impressive drivers throughout the year, but the competitiveness just wasn't there for the outfit throughout the year, and it also showed with Stoffel van Dorn, who just couldn't really impact the sharp end of the grid at all. I don't remember any race where he was really in for the win, so a bit of a weird underperformance, I would say, considering we all know that he is a quality driver as well. I doubt it's only him dropping off a cliff individually, so I do think Vergne just overperformed and did outdrive the car a little bit. I do hope the team as a whole can bounce back next year and actually give Vergne maybe a chance to fight for the title the way he's been driving last year. But yeah, as far as the inter-team battle is concerned, I hope Stoffel can bounce back, because that was very uncharacteristic and just too slow or too bad for what he is as a driver. So I wouldn't expect it to be this one-sided at all next year. But since Jeff didn't show any signs of slowing down either, I would definitely still expect him to beat Van Dorn once again. If you've enjoyed this video so far, feel free to leave a like or subscribe to the channel to not miss any future videos, and it will really help me out. Next up, we've got Porsche, who have been quite underwhelming considering how well they started the season, and crucially considering they did win the Driver Championship title at the end. The engine seemed to drop off over the year, or both teams dropped off at the same time over the course of the year. Nonetheless, in the factory team, Pascal Wehrlein did give it a good shot at the title, fighting at the sharp end consistently, especially in, I would say, like the first third of the season. They were really, really competitive. Unfortunately, he could not really sustain this campaign to the same extent that eventual champion Dennis could. So yeah, I didn't really know what happened there. On the flip side, his teammate Antonio Felix da Costa was almost anonymous in that time where Wehrlein was fighting 4 race wins and 4 podiums consistently. Da Costa was sort of in the midfield almost, a little bit stuck. That was a bit weird to watch. Towards the end of the season, they seemed to get closer together again, but only because Wehrlein just wasn't fighting as high up anymore. It is a bit of a weird one. Nonetheless, for next year, Porsche has decided that Da Costa will be focusing only on his Formula E campaign. He won't be racing in the World Endurance Championship next year or in IMSA. He'll just be driving Formula E cars, and therefore I do think he has a decent chance of bouncing back and fighting back. I don't want to say I think he is the better driver, but I think he certainly can be. This should be one of the closest and most interesting battles throughout the year if he can do what I think he should be able to do. And I'm actually going to be a little bit bold and predict that he is going to beat Wehrlein this time. On the flip side, we've got the Andretti Porsche customer team, and they, as I said, managed to win the title with Jake Dennis dominant driving throughout the year, during the time where the car was strong, but more impressively during the time where the car was noticeably struggling a little. He was still on the podium every single race. Just a stellar drive, super consistent, no big errors, everything you'd really want from a champion, which is why, although on paper there was still a chance, it wasn't really much of a competition going into the final doubleheader. On the flip side, his teammate Andre Lotterer just didn't really contribute anything to the team. It was really bizarre to watch. Lotterer was really shit, for lack of a better word. So it is only expected that he is getting replaced. With Norman Nato, that's maybe not quite as expected, not for me anyway. I mentioned earlier he did beat Fenestras quite considerably in the standings, but I also explained how I maybe don't think that's all too representative. So this could be an interesting duel. I don't really have too strong an opinion on Nato either way, but obviously just given what we've seen from Dennis this year, it would be crazy to predict anyone but him to win this particular duel. And last but not least, we have the reigning manufacturer champions, Jaguar. Interestingly, the Jaguar factory team didn't actually take the title. That was in fact envisioned, but we are thus going to talk about the factory team first. They have replaced Sam Bird after the aforementioned horrible performance last year, taking out teammate Evans multiple times during the season. They have in fact replaced him with almost champion Nick Cassidy, the longest contender to Dennis's throne at least. But yeah, I think Cassidy has made a few crucial mistakes over the year. So has Evans, maybe to a lesser extent. Nonetheless, both have been absolutely amazing drivers. Like those two together with Dennis and Wehrlein were really like the 4 drivers of the year. I think there's no real discussion. Throw in Verne for good measure depending on how you rate the cars. So this means we have 2 of the top 5 drivers of last year now combined in the same team. This immediately means it is my battle to watch out for next year. Close. The Porsche one is a close second, I'd say, or maybe a few others can come close, but this is really it. I do think Cassidy will take it, or I am going to predict Cassidy to take it, because he just has like an error or two to sort out essentially, right? Whereas Evans, I think, maybe had a little bit less raw pace to show. Nonetheless, this is really, really difficult to predict, hence why it is the most anticipated battle. So yeah, whatever. I think I'm going to predict the guy from New Zealand will win this one. On the Envision side, the team that actually got on to win the Teams Championship, well, Nick Cassidy got replaced, as I've said, and they actually brought in Robin Freins, who has left Abt, and I think he is in fact a perfect replacement. I'm glad he's finally back in a at least remotely competitive seat. Anything's better than the Abt, as we've mentioned earlier. He'll be partnered with Sebastian Buemi, who is maybe not the best teammate to have necessarily, as we've seen this season as well, but certainly a fast and proven racing driver. So those two should also make for an interesting pairing. I would expect maybe a little bit of, teammate drama if there is going to be some this year. It might be between those two. Buemi is often good for it. Nonetheless, I found this surprisingly difficult to predict because while I don't necessarily see either of them as championship contenders, both are the sort of drivers who you'd expect to see on the podium a few times over the year, maybe get a few wins, all that good stuff. And I don't know, at this point it's up to personal sympathy really, so I'm going to go with Freins. He didn't have the opportunity this year, maybe he is more hungry, but again, this is almost a coin flip. I think Buemi will find a way to ruin it for himself. There you go, that is my prediction. What is your spiciest prediction for the upcoming season? Or what inter-team battle do you think I got entirely wrong in this prediction video? Let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, I hope you'll watch the season opener this weekend, and I hope to also catch you here again next week when I'm going to be here to discuss all about it. Anyway, until then, take care and thank you all for watching. Bye!